How do you learn Thai without a teacher? Hey, can you learn Thai without a teacher? Well, my response to that would be pretty much the same as how do you learn Thai with a teacher? Because in my opinion, a teacher cannot teach you Thai. A teacher can't teach you anything. You got to learn it. I've seen since COVID, there's been a big pickup in people who have been using my book, Cracking Thai Fundamentals, that I put out several years ago, and actually just based on the program that I started back in the year 2000. So a long time now. Now, you can see Cracking Thai Fundamentals, pretty thick. You can use it as a weapon, if anything else. But a lot of people, when they buy this, some may be mistakenly thinking that this is going to be lesson 1, John and Mary are on the train station buying a ticket, lesson 2, and you've probably seen those types of courses. That is what this is not. And so in this clip here today, I want to talk about how to approach learning Thai and actually learning any language. And if you were going to be using this, what it would be useful for and what it wouldn't be useful for, and then how you can use other resources. So my apologies that today I might be spending quite a bit of time looking at different parts of Cracking Thai Fundamentals and different things I have put in there, both into the book, in the online program, and what other people are doing, because I actually put this together as a response to people who were having troubles learning with teachers or learning the traditional ways. And so I basically used this as a guide. If I were to approach learning the language without having to use a teacher, what would I have to do first? So first of all, let's just have a look at the topic, cracking the Thai fundamentals. Now, I guess this was inspired from many, many years ago. Back in the early 90s, I had a book called Cracking the Chinese Puzzles by TKN. And in my opinion, that was brilliant because it showed you how to almost use fuzzy logic, installing it in your brain. So when you looked at Chinese characters, even if you've never seen them before, by using the logic that's built into most native Chinese speakers, you could start to have guesstimates of what the language would be. And the way I look at Thai with my background in Indic languages, in Indonesian and different things like that, way back when I was first learning Thai, I was able to pick up Thai quite quickly because I found that I had a foundation in all of the building blocks, all of these components that make Thai Thai. And so if you have a look at the subtitle here, a Thai operating system for the mind. And that's pretty much what it is. If you're not a native Thai speaker, I wanted to try as much as possible to install that operating system that is running within a native Thai speaker. It's impossible to do it totally, but it's something that's very, very necessary because many learners of Thai have found themselves in a situation where they're either not hearing the tones, the teacher or somebody is saying something, they think they're repeating it correctly, it's not coming out. They may start translating word for word of something that they want to say and it just falls on deaf ears. People don't understand what they're trying to say. Or somebody might say something where you know the individual component words, but you'd be baffled as to what the actual meaning was. So the whole idea is, how do we get our mind into the space of a native speaker when we look at the language if we've never even learned that language before? And how can we turn our environment into something that teaches us the language around the clock? And for me, whether you have a teacher or not, all that teacher becomes is then a specimen, a native specimen of the language that then you control your learning from. But you have to have the internal skills to be able to extract that language. So whether it's a teacher or whether it's a sign that you're walking past, a menu that you're reading in the restaurant that you're sitting at, or a radio program, a television show, all of these things are specimens of the language, and you just need to have the skills to be able to extract that out and internalize what you're getting as input. And trust me, if you're doing it correctly, in time, the output will come. So Cracking Thai Fundamentals will help you do that. If you look at MINDKRAFT, this is putting it on steroids because it's taking you beyond just Thai and actually showing you all the components outside of Thai and all around. It extends to language learning in general. MINDKRAFT is pretty much the prequel to Cracking Thai Fundamentals. It actually should have come first, but it came 20 years later. But let me frame this for you. In the online Facebook group Phalang Kanun Thai Language, David Martin, who's been a member there for years, he would put up these sentences called super useful expressions. And these expressions I would see come up, over years. Every few weeks there'd be super useful expressions and you'd have a look and not think that much of them. But the other week, David put up 4,000 expressions. So he'd compiled them all. And so what I did was sit and look at these expressions and I thought, oh my goodness, this is the holy grail of the Thai language. Honestly, David, you've done an amazing job there because these sentences are the language that you're learning. Very often when you look at textbooks, when they will have these dialogues and things, they're things that the teacher has thought up to try and teach a lesson or teach a certain learning point within the language. And often that language will be augmented, it will be shifted into something that will suit the lesson. But what David's done here is the opposite. He has extracted real Thai language from the environment. And this stuff is absolutely phenomenal. Now, there's a catch because this language, if you just look at it in the way that he's presented as a PDF form, you may get it. So you can see here, he's put this PDF out and you've got the Thai, you've got whether it's formal, informal, sometimes you've got the level that it's at, it's using Kun Benjuan's standard of transliteration here. And he's tried his best to sort of express what this meaning would be in English. Now, that's a tough job because some things are really difficult to translate across. But what happens is if you read these sentences, what are you going to do? Just going to read them through the PDF? That's no good. And so this is where something like Cracking Thai Fundamentals and other resources that are out there are going to kick in. Before even approaching these sentences, you need to have a framework to lay them in. Otherwise, it's going to be like throwing a bunch of seed down on concrete. They're not going to go in anywhere. The roots aren't going to take you water them. They're just going to scatter. And the roots of the language will not be able to penetrate. And so the next day, after you've read a few sentences, they're just going to be gone. And so you need to set up this framework. How do you set up the framework? Well, the first thing that I do is take my free tones webinar that came out because that's going to get the tones down for you. And you're going to be able to start to train your ear, train your mouth, train your body to embed these tones into your body. Now, the tones webinar isn't just for Thai. You'll be able to hear tones across any language, but that would be my starting point. So click on the link below, go and do the tones webinar totally free. But after that masterclass, you're ready to proceed. And then let's look at the route that I'm taking you on this, because by the end of this, you will have everything that you need to be able to read, turn this into different resources. So for example, in Cracking Thai Fundamentals, I show you how to take this, turn this into maybe a text file, a CSV file, and from that you can turn them into flashcards and even show you at the end of the book and include the script for you so you can even make spaced repetition. So you'll be able to generate spaced repetition files to teach you like this.
Spot on, exactly. ถูกเพลงเลย ถูกเพลงเลย 3. Exactly, that's what I thought. นั่นแหละ นั่นแหละ
All from a PDF file like this. Now, we were going through this PDF file in our MINDKRAFT class the other day, and there were people who were learning Thai, people who weren't learning Thai, but it was amazing. We were just basically playing roulette with this, taking any spot, stopping, and we found that you could have an hour-long lesson just on 3 of these sentences because it's so rich. But why is it rich? Because it gets into these things that aren't normally apparent, possibly, if you're looking at it through the lens of English. So say you're learning Thai, David has gone to all the trouble of extracting the language now from the environment into something like this. Now, you're not going to only use this PDF document, but it is an amazing resource that you can use, and you can actually use this once you see through Cracking Thai Fundamentals to push it back into the environment and turn this into something that's living. So let me show you how Cracking Thai Fundamentals would approach this. And in doing that, I'm just going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through the book. So first of all, to give you an overall framework of how I've framed this book, and there's a reason why I've done it in this order. And so the first section of the book is all about preparation, and I break it into 3 areas. You've got preparing your mind, because you might be thinking through English and you may be missing all of this stuff that's happening because your mind isn't tuned into it. Also, your mind controls how your mouth works. We start to focus on some things that are going on in the non-native Thai speaker mouth versus the native Thai speaker mouth. Because once we're aware of it and we bring it into our conscious, we can start to tweak it and then push it back into the subconscious when we're speaking Thai. So that's our mental preparation. Then we do preparation of the environment. Now, how do we build an environment that's going to teach us, which is super important? And then finally, physical preparation. So you've got 3 preparations around us: mental, physical, and the environment. And so between my Tones webinar and those, your mind should pretty much be primed with this operating system of a Thai native speaker, ready to take on all of the next stuff. For example, in English, I could say big, bigger, biggest, tall, taller, tallest, pretty, prettier, prettiest. We've got these patterns, and what happens when a lot of learners come to learn Thai, they might want to apply this pattern and say, how do you say prettier? How do you say prettiest into Thai? Now, the reality is we don't have this concept in Thai. And so there are words that could mean prettier, but when you think of prettier in English as opposed to Thai, they're actually different concepts. And so I introduced these as black and white words. Now, maybe it's not politically correct when I first designed it 20 years ago, but I still think it's extremely relevant even today. And color, associating color with meanings, they trigger something inside that can hook into things outside of language. And so black and white words are actually something that is very common to grammars and semantic building blocks to languages all over this region. And so rather than having pretty, prettier, prettiest, tall, taller, tallest, we apply these concepts of kun, long, where something is getting whiter and whiter or blacker and blacker. And so we have to know culturally how something is, whether it's a black or white concept, positive, negative. And once we understand that culturally, whether it's a black or a white concept, well, then we can apply these things that are going to extend its whiteness or extend its blackness. This is what we mean by black or white words. And then you don't need to have pretty, prettier, prettiest, ugly, uglier, ugliest, because we're applying an entirely different paradigm. So anyway, this is one of the things that we do in the preparing your mind. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's the first section. So you should spend quite a bit of time on that section because you really, really need to till the ground and get your mind into that right place. Now, the second section is probably the most important, especially when it comes to looking at things like these 4,000 words that David Martin's put together. This is thinking in meanings. And so in Thai, you cannot translate directly from English. You can't do it with any language when you're learning it. You need to find ways of constructing meanings, and sometimes you'll find a way to do it, and sometimes Thai might even have ways of building meanings that we just don't have in English. And so what I did was come up with hand signs, kun, long, pai, ma, hai, lap, which when a learner learns these words, they might learn just the English surface translations and never really appreciate the depth of how they're used and how they function within Thai. And so with words like this, say the word hai. If you speak Chinese, you know the word gei, to give or to bestow. Hai, but hai just doesn't mean to give. And so I will take you through, I've got a whole section just on the word hai. So if I said, give me the pen, can you grab the pen and give it to me? Okay, so this hai is the physical giving, but then I could say, ปิดไฟให้พี่หน่อย Can you turn the light off for me? Here, the hai would be translated into English as for, but actually the concept, this base concept, whether it's in Thai, whether it's in Chinese or many languages around here, is still this concept of bestowing. It doesn't change. It only changes when it crosses that threshold of being translated into English, and it confuses the crap out of English speakers. And you could take it another level. I could say, I want to get you to turn the light off. That would then be ให้ปิดไฟ ปิดไฟ is turn the light off. And then ให้ปิดไฟ get you to turn the light off. In English, it's a totally different word again, but in Thai, it's still this concept of bestowing. I could say, I want to get David to turn the light off for me. อยากจะให้คุณ David ปิดไฟให้พี่หน่อย. So I've used ให้ here twice in these sentences. Now, in Thai, in the Thai psyche, it's still this concept of bestowing. It doesn't change. In Chinese, it's the same. Indonesian, kasih, it would even be the same, and you would use it in the same way. But in English, we're translating it into these different words that go off into all of these different semantic tangents that can confuse the heck out of a learner of Thai. Now, what we do is we start to bring our minds back into these concepts, these root concepts that Thais would think in as native speakers, and then we start to test and do guesstimates. I'll give you experiments and you'll be able to start to develop thought fluency, not only listening to meanings that would be native to Thai, but building your own meanings. So this is why we call it thinking in meanings. And there's a whole section about getting your brain malleable, thinking in the Thai mind. And we use these hand signs and a whole bunch of other stuff so you can just escape the shackles of English semantics and start having thought fluency much more in the vein of how a native Thai speaker would be thinking of listening to, understanding, comprehending meanings, and then creating their own meanings to be understood. Then the next section, one thing that you'll often hear from learners is, oh, Thai has so many consonants and Thai doesn't use spaces between the words, and all these comparisons to, say, English or other languages that serve to scare people before they've even learned. And so I introduced the concept of abugidas, which are not alphabets. Thai is not an alphabet, it's an abugida. And you'll hear through, whether it's the online version or within the book, vowels and consonants are different species. Vowels breathe life into consonants. So consonants and vowels within an abugida, they have different roles. The beautiful thing about this system, the Indic system, is it's a map of the human mouth, and this is the system that the Thai script is based on. And so you don't need spaces because the vowels just act as these frames that delineate syllables, and you will never get vowels confused with consonants, so you can just see syllables there. And so rather than getting these spaces, it actually slows you down a bit. If you've got spaces in there, you're just going to see these light up. So I take you through this, and not only do we start to look at vowels, consonants, and putting these together and then being able to train our mind to be able to see these meaning semantic blocks, these syllables, but you're also going to start to tune into these base shapes. And so learning the actual shapes of the letters is not the difficult thing. It's understanding the system. And then we have some tricks as well, where across Indic scripts, there are these base shapes. And so what I do within it, I'll actually show you all of the different fonts that you might see in Thai, but also other scripts that have influenced it, and you can start using these pattern matching skills that you're developing. So it doesn't matter what font you see the script in, it doesn't matter even what language. Sometimes you might see it in Khmer or even Burmese. You're going to start to recognize these base shapes, primitive shapes that you see across all of these Indic scripts. So whether it's Thai, it's Lao that you're learning, or even Khmer or Burmese, you'll see these common patterns and be able to learn more and more scripts much more rapidly. In fact, students of MINDKRAFT, we get into this from the get-go, and by the third, fourth session, people are learning scripts in an afternoon. I'm going to spend 20 minutes, I'm going to learn Khmer, and then I'm going to learn Burmese, because you start recognizing these patterns. That's just this version of this. And so as you're seeing different versions, Balinese, Javanese, Khmer, Tibetan, it's almost like looking at different fonts. And if something is very different, if a letter has a very different shape, then that huge difference then serves as a memory peg. But anyway, I'm getting off track, but all of that is actually in Cracking Thai Fundamentals, getting into the Indic script and then the Thai script, which then leads us into the vowels. And the vowels, I've also got hand signs for them. So we've got like I, which you will learn. And I find the reason why I use hand signs for these is because once we get it into our body, they really stick. We get it into our muscle memory. And so we're able to, E, and this looks like the mouth, E, it's narrow, and E, we extend it with a long finger, and physically doing it rather than just reading it off the page, it does something. But the other cool thing is if you meet any Thai and you say, here's E, here's E, here's O, here's, you can start to get them to respond back. They will twig on to what you're doing, and then you can use this one as a tool to start interactions and build these relationships with Thai. Two, to extract those sounds, the native sounds from native speakers of the language. And it's fun. It's much better than just sort of listening to this one-way videotape or audio file that's teaching you the language. It's all about building an environment around you that will teach you the language. That includes building relationships with native speakers and extracting the language from them. And then finally, the topic everybody loves, tones. Now, I wish I had have done my tones webinar way before I put Cracking Thai Fundamentals out, but by combining both the free tones webinar that I mentioned at the beginning of this and then the whole tones section at the back, because then there are tone rules. We approach tones from so many different angles by the time you get through the webinar and by the time you get through the section in the book, and if you're doing the online program as well. You're just going to be a master of tones. And these tonal rules that people try and confuse you with and say they're so complicated, they're not complicated. And heck, I've even come up with a few very easy to remember stories. They're very vivid, using characters that we all know and love. And just through thinking of these stories, you're going to be able to automatically generate the tone rules from inside here. You won't even have to think of them as a table or anything. You're just going to feel the tone rules. So then when you read anything in Thai, the tones are going to be screaming out internally, because the beautiful thing about the Thai script is the tones are built into the spelling. Not in a way like Vietnamese uses diacritics, because the diacritics in Vietnamese say Vietnamese tone markers were designed for Northern Vietnamese. And so when you read these words in Southern Vietnamese, you've had tone merges and things happen like that, but you're still reading the different diacritics, the different tone markers. And this is the problem with a Western system trying to force these tone markers, because the tones, the way they're rendered, will shift from village to village even. But the beautiful thing about the Thai system is no matter where you are, whether it's from Southern China all the way down to Southern Thailand, the spelling of the word does not change, and that spelling of the word can have a one-to-one relationship to the tone, and you can map them out. And I include these tone boxes so you can not only map Bangkok Thai and just feel those and have those stories that I mentioned, but you can go anywhere in the TAI Thai speaking world and map the tones of that dialect, of that flavor of Thai, TAI, and you'll be able to, with the normal reading, the same way that you write the word in Bangkok Thai, you write it the same way, but just read the new mapping of it and you'll get the tone perfectly. And so that's pretty much what Cracking Thai Fundamentals is. I've also got other sections in there for people, say you already read an Indic script like Hindi or Burmese or something. I've got other things that are going to help you get a jump start, as well as tools like my consonant compass online, which you can jump in and use now for free. Anyone can jump in, just check on that link and you'll be able to click through the consonant compass as you go through. But you see, it's this beautiful map that maps to all of the tone rules, maps to your mouth. So you can use that and even jump through other Indic languages. And I also have a section in there if you are a Chinese speaker, Japanese speaker, Korean speaker, or even Vietnamese speaker. I'll show you how there are a whole bunch of vocab items within Thai that maybe were shrouded by the sound system of Thai. And so you get a whole bunch of free vocab from your Japanese, from your Korean, from your Chinese, no matter what dialect you speak, because I'll show you actually how to shift those sounds. And the beautiful thing is, if you use this Thai Abugida, this map of the human mouth based on the Indic system, it works across Chinese too. Chinese actually use this system too, and they had a system called the Cheyun system, where it's pretty much the Thai alphabet order just flipped on its head, and Chinese can be mapped to this as well. So Cracking Thai Fundamentals, there's something in there for everybody. If you don't have a copy of the book yet, if you're in Thailand, just go to jacademy.com and you can order it. If you're not in Thailand, go to Amazon, just Google it, Cracking Thai Fundamentals, and you'll be able to order a copy of it for you there. But if it's in Thailand, I can get one shipped to you directly, usually within the same day or overnight. And if you really want to take your learning seriously, well then you need MINDKRAFT. And we have like over 50 people through MINDKRAFT at the moment. They're an amazing community. If you want to just come into the Discord server, totally free, you can come in, just scan the QR code up top. But we have native speakers, we have learners of Thai, as well as a bunch of other languages at all different levels. So this is part of the environment. But then many of those are doing Cracking Thai Fundamentals. Many of those people are actually MINDKRAFT students. But it's this amazing community that is going to be able to uplift your learning and motivate you. Keep that momentum going. So at the very least, jump into our Discord server, and then also go get books like Bingo's Learning Thai Script in 10 Days, because it's an amazing book. It's an amazing resource. And then you can also get resources like these from David Martin's. In MINDKRAFT, we actually took these, converted them into CSV files, and then from those we created text-to-speech, spaced repetition, as well as flashcards, as well as bilingual text. MINDKRAFT gives you all of the data skills and digital skills to really be able to make the most and extract everything that can be possibly milked from the data that you gather from around your environment, whether it's online data or from people or audio or television. You'll be able to take those language specimens and internalize them and make sense of them and turn it into your own fluency. So anyway, that's Cracking Thai Fundamentals, MINDKRAFT. And I'm not just saying go and get my courses, but this is not a guide to take you lesson 1, lesson 2, John and Mary on the station, John and Mary are going to see the movies. This is going to set your mind, your body, your environment up and fill all of those gaps that you would ever have about the Thai language. So you've got this solid platform and a plan then so you can build an environment and go on and learn the language. If you want to learn it through John and Mary at the train station books, eat your heart out. If you want to have a teacher, you can use that teacher, but then you're in control of your learning. I'm Stuart J. Raj. Get a copy of Cracking Thai Fundamentals, and I'll see you on the other side.